Welcome back.
Hi, I'm Matt Rouge. This is JB Symons. We're going to be talking about Chapter 7 of our book, Getting to Why,
Wellness.
which is, you said it, it's wellness. Wellness is really important. This video is going to be in two parts. We're going to do the main content, and we're going to have a separate video about the cycle of wellness, which is probably the most complicated thing in the book, so bear with us on that, and the workbook. So that'll be part 2 of this chapter. So let's talk about wellness. It's really a crucial concept along with change. And wellness is a lot more than simply avoiding being sick.
Yeah, there's a lot more to being well than not being sick. That's, I've said that multiple ways. And that applying the concept of wellness to all 7 areas of your life, and also where we are on the 4-quadrant component that we put together for each of those areas, is that there's I don't want to call sickness all the time. Mm-hmm. Okay, but let's just say that today I may be unwell. Okay, not good, not healthy, just so. If you were to plot that, you would probably be moving toward the center in at least one area of your life, between pleasure and pain and satisfaction and dissatisfaction.
Right.
You're being neutralized at that point. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what creates an event of unwellness?
Right.
Okay, because you've got 2 sides to this, and we'll talk about it in the next video in terms of what that looks like. You got the wellness side, and you got the unwell side. Mm-hmm. And change, back to change again, change initiates an event of unwellness. Mm-hmm. Back to the grief situation.
Right.
And so you hit on the unwell side. And the moment that you get there is the easiest time for us to move to the wellness side. There's a substantial bridge that goes over communication and cooperation, understanding and trust. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that. That's in that channel between the 2 components of wellness and unwellness. And what gets us through that communication, cooperation, understanding and trust is hopefully friends. Mm-hmm. Okay? And it can be self-diagnosed and self-inflicted, mm-hmm. positive or negative. Mm-hmm. But all of us are somewhere in flux between wellness and unwellness.
Right.
Okay? And each area of our life has its own cycle going on as well. Overall.
We could be physically in great shape, but our finances could be unwell, for example.
Oh, yeah. Pretty common these days. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a whole another chapter or 6.
Right, exactly. Well, one of the important concepts we talked about in the book, of course, and in an earlier video is pleasure and satisfaction, pleasure and pain, and satisfaction and dissatisfaction, and the danger of getting in the habit of simply avoiding pain. And we see that some people in life have developed a false approach to wellness in which they avoid pain, they feel better, it's like, oh, I'm better. And then they get in that cycle, which we call the Phoenix syndrome, of rising and falling and continuing to cycle out of the pain and feel like that's pleasure and then that's good, instead of staying in the happy quadrant.
Well, plus your threshold sometimes begin, your ability to withstand pain, so that we all are a little bit different in terms of how much pain we can experience and manage. I have a really dear friend who has terrible allergies. Mm-hmm. I mean, she is allergic to something year-round. Mm-hmm. And that she'll take some kind of allergy medication almost on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. How do you feel? And I know she doesn't feel well, mm-hmm. okay? But compared to what it was yesterday or the day before, what it may be, she feels better.
Right.
So it is really relative in terms of how well can I be physically, mm-hmm. and then you can apply that to socially and so financially, those kind of things. Is that I'm not really well where I'd like to be, but I can accept where I am. Mm-hmm. So your tolerance is one thing, mm-hmm. okay? and that the pain threshold, I've obviously been around people whose pain threshold is extraordinarily high, that you almost cut an arm off and they say, oh, that's just a flesh wound. I just thought about Spam-A-Lot. Just for a
Oh,
second
yeah, Monty
there.
Python, right?
How people face these particular modifications or changes and how it impacts their sense of well-being. And let's just go right to the end result. You're going to be sick, okay? Enough unwellness or events of serious attacks on the wellness areas of your life, you will be ill. And some doctors will tell you that 80% of most illnesses are psychosomatic.
Really?
Yeah, it's not here down, it's here up.
Okay.
And so that when you go to the doctor, again, 80% of the things the doctor sees is pretty routine and mundane kind of stuff, and here, take this and be fine.
Right.
Of the 20%, which the doctors will have to be a doctor for, okay, 80% of that have to be given to specialists because it's beyond their particular scope. So the doctors are kind of stuck with 2, 3, 4% of the patients that come in that really challenge their medical training,
Right.
and give them a sense of satisfaction. Now, how does that make the doctor feel? How well are they in terms of, you want to stay in this field and treat 80% of the people that come in there are just going to be going through the motions.
Right.
And if they simply would treat themselves, take an aspirin or do exercise or whatever it may be, they wouldn't go to the doctor.
Right.
That's just an aside in terms of where wellness resides.
Right.
Okay? It is that if you look at all 7 areas of your life, the bulk of that is opinionated and manifest through what we think about that.
Okay.
I met Norman Vincent Peale years ago, and that he wrote the book on power positive thinking.
Right.
That came off of Napoleon Hill's book, in that
Think and Grow Rich.
and Grow Rich. And the big 6 words were, you become what you think about. And that's a very powerful, and all motivational books from that point on really harken back to Napoleon Hill's original thought processes and his 20 years of putting that information together of you become what you think about. So
Fundamental type of, fundamental concept.
an interesting motivational speaker is Zig Ziglar, who passed
She's one of my
away a few
favorites.
years ago.
Yeah.
Talked about stinking thinking. And that's kind of cute, but quite frankly, it's very accurate, is that part of our wellness comes from, or unwellness comes from stinking thinking.
Right.
And we become what we think about.
I've heard it described as head trash as well.
Good idea.
What do you think, when we think about wellness, we see a lot of celebrities, entertainers, actors, musicians, who don't seem very well, even though you'd think they'd have the resources to be well. Is it just because the news focuses on whoever's not doing well at the time, or is there actually something that affects celebrities that makes them different?
Have we talked about becoming the role?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's
Avoiding the role trap.
Yeah,
Chapter
let's kind of
5.
go back to that, is that if you're told that you're wonderful enough, you begin to kind of sort of believe it. And that instead of being the core person, you become influenced by the celebrity that you are. The musician, the artist, or whatever it may be. You start living in that particular role.
Okay.
And it's easy to become enamored by that, trapped in that, or maybe even narcissistic in that, in terms of that. You've all heard the stories about rock and roll groups that they want only red jelly beans and green M&Ms when they go,
Right.
when they go to the hotels. It's just crazy. They start asking for things that perpetuate I'm important.
Right.
Because it has to be an external event to indicate I get these things because I'm important, instead
Right.
of being able to just get up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, I'm important. I don't have to be reinforced by anyone else to make those kind of things happen. And so the celebrity you talked about, there are some extraordinarily healthy people that we can name that are enormously talented and exhibit a caring about others kind of thing, rather than a selfish, narcissistic, it's all about me type of behavior and performance. I think if you went to Washington, D.C. and went to Congress, you would probably see a lot of those behaviors, the one I just described.
Okay. When we see, one factor we see in celebrities and their wellness is drug addiction a lot, and we even have a show, Celebrity Rehab, with Dr. Drew. Are celebrities more prone to addiction, or is it just, are they just like everyone else in terms of their likelihood to become addicted?
I think that's kind of a trick question. I believe that quite a bit of that comes from bad management. That a celebrity has a manager, a coach, or whatever, a mentor, or whatever. Let's call them a surrogate parent. And so,
Like the Colonel for Elvis.
yeah, and well, we'll take that. The Colonel's income is predicated on how well Elvis can continue to work and display his talents and those kind of things. And so, in order to keep Elvis going and keep the income coming into the Colonel,
Right.
he will introduce certain drugs or pet pills or whatever it may be to make those kind of things happen, and then it begins addiction. So I don't have any percentages of how often that happens, but generally a celebrity that becomes addicted to either drugs or alcohol, an outside source or influence has helped them to get there. They didn't do it on their own.
Okay.
And so be careful who you surround yourself with.
Makes a lot of sense. One insight you took, you were around at the time. I had not yet been born. I was a couple years out, but it was the lunar flight of the Apollo mission to the moon.
Yeah.
Which were pretty spectacular, of course. And you have noted that they were off course 98% of the time, but they corrected 100% of the time.
Right. I preface that by saying, if you were going to go on a trip of several hundred miles, and you were going to be off course 98% of the time, would you go on that trip? And the answer is usually no.
I think not.
Well, the whole concept of when you went to the moon, the whole new word sprang up because of telemetry.
Right.
It started in the first, when Shepard started, they started wiring people up so they knew all of the different wellness issues of what's going on, not only with the individual, but also the capsule as well. The words pitch and yaw were coined during that, because pitching is this way and yawing is this way. And so in the world of goal setting, okay, you're going to be off course. And so now we're going to metrics in terms of how often do we evaluate or determine, are we on track with where we want to go? So if you were to watch the trip from the Earth around and off we go to the moon, that there is a kind of a sine wave event where, and you said it earlier, they were off course 98% of the time, but they corrected 100% of the time. The reason why they corrected, because they knew they had ways of measuring where am I and how am I doing. Now, here's the other question. Was that experience of Earth to the moon, was it successful?
Yes.
How do you know?
They made it there and they made it back.
That's the second part. The real success of that mission is they made it back. So number 13 didn't make it. They went around the moon and came back.
Right.
They didn't land. But people sometimes celebrate too early. Is that the celebration occurs when you come back.
Right.
And sometimes we celebrate when we get to another area of our life, and instead of saying, okay, now where is this going to take me? And come back to daily living and those kind of things. So back to the wellness picture, though.
Right. So one of the important concepts that we introduced in the book is that wellness is like a lunar mission, in that you're never perfectly well, perhaps, but you can continually correct to ensure that you're pretty close to being
Yeah, we've
well.
talked about this in previous chapters, is that we both meditate. And invariably, when I take a few minutes, and sometimes as quick as 8 or 9, 10 minutes, to do just kind of an evaluation, you stop and you start, I start at the top of my head and go all the way down to the bottom of my feet. Sometimes I'll reverse it, but it's just little slices, and I'll find some part of me that I didn't realize that just in normal day-to-day activity. Where'd that come from? There's a
little muscle.
There's a trigger point here, or there's a spasm here, and so I pay attention to it.
Right.
And do something about it. I don't take a drug necessarily. I just will pay attention to it, and so that I hopefully make it go away, or at least address it, so that I don't make it worse, because I will. If you don't pay attention what's going on, your body will eventually say, you're done. Okay? I think that
Right.
I've always believed that there's about, pick a number, 200 or 300 different things that can give you a cold. I believe, and have believed for a long time, that a cold is the body's way of saying, slow down. Because what do you do when you get a cold?
You slow down.
You slow down.
Yeah.
You maybe spend some time in bed, and you treat yourself with hot tea or something that's more medicinal in effect.
Right.
And so I haven't, this is a little bit bragging here, but I haven't had a cold. I've had one cold in 35 years.
Really?
Yeah. I just don't, because every time I get a little bit of scratchy, I'll take about a gram or two of vitamin C and become a very hostile environment for bugs. But I pay attention to what's going on and blow it out of there.
That's your way of correcting on your lunar journey.
Yeah, I'm paying attention. This is not normal. And so, and I will typically slow things down a little bit so that something, my body's telling me that you're going to have a cold if you don't pay attention here.
Got to watch that.
Now, other medical doctors will fuss with me about that ridiculous diagnosis, but that's okay.
That's your method.
They can have their cold.
Okay, well, we talked about the basic concepts of the chapter. We're now going to stop here, and in the next video, we will pick up and talk about the cycle of wellness and the workbook. So if you'd like to get your workbook pages ready, and there's also a graphic of the cycle of wellness that is available for free at gettingtowhy.com. You can download the workbook and some of the diagrams, visuals we have. So please take a look at that. Thank you. If you found this video helpful, please like JB's channel and like the video.
We'll see you
Subscribe
soon.
and like. Thanks.